His Royal Highness, the Royal King of our Royal Kingdom, hereby makes this royal proclamation. Next Royal Saturday night at the Royal Palace, there will be a royal ball, and everyone in the Royal Kingdom is welcome to attend. Y'all come here.
And naturally, the first one to hear the good news was Cinderella's conniving-type stepmother.
What a wonderful opportunity. Do you realize that if either of my lovely daughters marries the prince, I'd be sort of step-queen by marriage?
So the evil stepmother got out her sewing machine and made a special formal gown for herself and rhinestone Levi's for her two darling daughters. Anyway, soon the big night arrived, and at the ballroom in the royal palace, the king and his son, the prince, were watching the guests arriving by the dozens. So a royal dinner was served, and the hungry guests ate like there was no tomorrow, believe me. A cool combo consisting of a zither, a bass viola, a piccolo, oboe, and a 10-string kerosene guitar started playing, and the dancing was underway. Back home, meanwhile, as Cindy lay on her little army cot weeping, she heard a most unusual voice call to her.
Cinderella! Cinderella! Who's there? It is I, me, you know, your fairy-type godmother. Well, what do you want, fairy godmother? You've done a lot of good deeds for a lot of people, and you deserve to have a little happiness of your own. Now, isn't there something you want?
Well, I'd love to go to the royal ball, but it's impossible. I don't have any clothes but these old rags.
Fiddlesticks! Nothing is impossible to me.
And with that, the fairy-type godmother waved her magic wand and said,
Rickety-rack, shish boom bo. On the ball a magic wand and go, go, go!
Yes, that's what she said, all right. And as she touched Cinderella's old threadbare threads, they changed as if by magic to a real crazy outfit, you know? And Cindy looked in the mirror, but she couldn't believe her eyes. 'Cause now she was wearing an off-the-shoulder mink T-shirt with rhinestone capris, ermine bobby socks, and a lovely pair of glass sneakers.
Oh, fairy godmother, it's so lovely, but I still can't go to the royal ball.
And why not?
Because my scooter threw a rod and every cab in town is at the palace.
If all you need is transportation, dearie, relax. I can put you in a little low-mileage beauty in no time. Just go out in the field and bring me a large pumpkin.
How large?
Oh, a 4-passenger pumpkin ought to do it.
You know, Cindy thought her fairy godmother had kind of flipped. But she followed instructions anyways and brought in a nice big pumpkin. Well, raising her magic wand again, the fairy-type godmother said,
Rickety-rack, shish boom bo. Get on the ball, you magic wand, and go, go, go!
She used to be a pom-pom girl. And with that, fairy godmother touched the big pumpkin with her magic wand, and right before Cindy's eyes, it changed into the most knocked-out dragster you ever seen. I mean, like, wow. You know, I mean, this rig had everything. You know, like fuel injection, a flatty mill, chrome pipes, a 404 cam, a pair of regulation slicks on the rear, and dummy spots. I mean, this is a real tool job, like, you know what I mean, man? Like, this mill could make it at any one of the drags if it wanted, because it was Ennsville. But the fairy godmother warned Cindy, to remember one important thing. Cindy must be back home before midnight, or her beautiful clothes is going to turn back into dirty rags, and her chromy dragster is going to turn back into a pumpkin. Well, now, Cindy, was all set to go to the big bash. So she thanked her fairy godmother, fastened her seatbelt, adjusted her goggles, and blasted off to go make the scene at the royal shindig. when Cindy drives up to the palace, all eyes are on her rail. Man, like nobody in this kingdom has ever seen a flathead with so much chrome, you know? And, well, what I mean to tell you, when Junior spotted that chromy dragster, it was like love at first sight, you know what I mean? You see, the prince, too, was a flathead buff. So, once the combo starts beating out a neat jerk tune. And Cindy and the prince starts doing the jerk. And the dance went on and on, with the prince asking Cinderella for every dance. Boy, they danced the twist, Watusi, Hully-Gully, and the swim. Cindy's two stepsisters stood by watching and hating Cindy because she was like, coming on the belle of the ball. But they didn't recognize her in such fancy clothes, you know? It was like a dream. She could have danced all night. But she remembered what the fairy godmother had clued her in on, that if she didn't get home before midnight, her beautiful clothes would turn back into rags, and her chrome dragster would turn back into a crummy pumpkin. So Cindy looked at the big clock on the palace wall. It said 11:59 in addition to tick-tock. And in one more minute, the magic was going to end, and Cinderella must leave at once.
I hate to be a party pooper,
said Cinderella.
but I really must be running along.
Stop!
Called the prince nasally.
I didn't even ask you your name yet. Please don't go.
But Cindy ran on through the marble halls and down the palace steps. And halfway down, she dropped one of her glass sneakers and started to go back to get it, but it was too late, because in a few more seconds, the magic spell would end, you know? So she had to keep running. And with the puzzled prince still begging her to come back, poor Cindy leaped into the dragster, fastened the seatbelt, and blasted off down the freeway. She was like really laying down rubber when suddenly, before she could even make a pit stop...
Uh-oh, the cycle fuzz.
All right. Let's see your registration papers.
Registration papers? But I don't have any.
Okay, who owns this heap?
Well, I guess I do.
You guess you do? Where'd you get this rail?
Well, my fairy godmother made this rod out of a big old pumpkin.
A pumpkin, huh? And a fairy godmother, huh? Oh, boy. How come I run into all of you kooks? All right, let me see your driver's license.
But just coincidentally, at that second, the clock in the church steeple ding-donged of midnight. And exactly at midnight, a very peculiar thing happened. The chromy dragster turned back into a pumpkin.
Well, I still want to see your driver's license.
So who needs a driver's license to drive a pumpkin?
You know something? She had the officer there. He couldn't come up with an answer.
Well, I still don't go over that nonsense about fairy godmothers. And I wouldn't believe it if I saw it with my own eyes.
Well, just as he said that, who should appear but Cindy's fairy godmother, and before the glass-eyed cop could say a word, the fairy-type godmother raised her wand and said,
Rickety-rack, sis boom bo. Get on the ball, oh magic wand, and go, go, go.
Then the fairy godmother gently touched the officer's sickle and turned it into a pumpkin. Well, I'm going to tell you that. That was a funny sight, watching that motorcycle policeman standing there trying to crank a pumpkin, you know? Meanwhile, back at the palace, the prince decided to have a house-to-house search throughout the kingdom, you know? He would take the glass slipper personally and try it on every maiden in the land, and the girl whose foot fit the glass slipper would be his royal princess and live in the palace with the king. And when the two stepsisters learned that the prince would search their house next, they real quick put their hair in curlers, slipped into their rhinestone Levi's, and awaited breathlessly for the prince to call, you know. But when the prince saw the two homely sisters, he backed out of the house saying,
Excuse me, I must be in the wrong land.
but the girls reminded him of his offer to marry the girl whose foot fit the glass slipper. So first Lena tried on the slipper, and she squeezed and she tugged until she finally yelled,
I did it! It's in the glass slipper!
I'm sorry, said the prince, but the rule states plainly that the entire foot must fit into the glass slipper, not just the big toe.
Well, when the fat stepsister Fatima saw the tiny glass slipper, she looked down sadly at her size 14 double E combat boots and said,
I pass.
just as Prince was starting to leave, he looked out the window and saw Cinderella plowing in the back 40.
Bring her in,
Demanded the prince.
But, Princey, surely you're not thinking of letting a dirty little field hand try on that dainty glass slipper.
Why not? She's kind of cute. I dig her the most. So have her come in at once.
So Cinderella was called in to try on the little glass slipper, you know. And the two envious stepsisters looked on with envy as the prince slipped the glass slipper onto Cinderella's dainty foot with ease. And the prince announced right then and there that Cinderella was to be his princess and live in the royal palace happily ever after.
Then the story has a happy ending, Jinxie?
Well, not exactly. I mean, you see, just as the prince and Cinderella started to leave the house, the sneaky stepmother yelled,
Hold it! You're forgetting one important thing, Princey.
Like what?
Like, you ought to talk with a little more respect to your new stepmother-in-law.
Stepmother-in-law?
Natch! Listen, since Cinderella will be your wife and she's my stepdaughter by marriage, then you'll be my stepson by marriage and I'll be your stepmother-in-law by marriage. And since the king is your father and you're his son, the prince, then I'll be the step-queen-in-law by marriage and I'll have to live in the palace with my new stepson-in-law and my lovely stepdaughter. Of course, my own two lovely daughters will come to live with me. Us. We'll all be just one big, happy family.
Aw, Jinxie, that's not really the way the story of Cinderella ended, is it?
No, I guess I just kind of like, putting you on. I mean, all right, now here's the real story of Cinderella.
Many years ago, in a kingdom far away, there lived a girl that we all know and love until this day. Cinderella's life was sad, she never had a fella. The most unhappy girl on earth was poor Cinderella. And when the royal trumpets blew, inviting one and all to the royal palace dance, the kingdom had a ball. But Cindy had to stay at home, poor Cindy was in tears. But suddenly a fairy queen magically appears. With her magic wand in hand, the fairy touched her crown, and there Cinderella stood in a magic jeweled gown. With her magic wand once more, the fairy waved her hand, and suddenly a coach appeared, the finest in the land. And when the kingdom's charming prince saw Cindy at the ball, he knew at once that Cindy was the fairest of them all. Cindy danced until midnight. She remembered what the fairy said. Her heart was filled with fright. At midnight the spell would be dead. As Cindy ran out of his life, the prince was left alone. He wanted Cindy for his wife, but now his love was gone. The prince, he had not learned the name of this lovely lass. The only thing she left behind was a slipper made of glass. The prince did search from home to home to find his love so fair, until he learned the slipper fit the girl with golden hair. And when the prince did wed his love, the kingdom rang with laughter, as Cindy and her charming prince lived happily ever after. Remember, Cinderella, no matter what you do, in some way Cindy's story might happen to you. Might happen to you. Might happen to you.